Thank you, Carolyn, and welcome everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, the Conversation Circle, sponsored by Still and Moving Center. We do always start with our theme for the year and the quote that pertains to it. And as I was listening to this quote that you just read, Carolyn, and you read about sever any tie in my heart except the tie that binds my heart to yours. That really reminded me of last week's theme, on which Piyush Kumar gave us a presentation on consciousness of divine will. And this week we're moving into the topic of Svadharma. And the catchphrase for that we're using, one moment. Svadharma, our self-found duty. And so we're very pleased to welcome Piyush back. He's from the Kashmiri Shaivite tradition himself. He's also been an explorer into many of the world's great traditions and into life itself, I would say. He comes with an open mind that spans the spiritual to the scientific and a lot of things in between. So we're really looking forward to how you're going to start us out today, Piyush, on this very essential, I think, Hindu concept of Swadharma. So take it away.
Thank you, Renée, and it's a pleasure to be back again. And as I was sharing last time, just the talk about just the scheduling for the consciousness of the divine will and the Swadharma is just, it's just so aligned, and as we were talking, on the phone a few weeks ago and talking about these two concepts, and I was just thinking that proverb that comes from maybe some of the Judaist tradition around as above, so below. So that's kind of where we are stepping into with this Swadharma as well. I think last time we talked about as above, and now we're going to talk about so below. So it's very well aligned with that. And as it happens, in the tradition that I come from, many of the spiritual inquiries are defined or guided by this concept of dharma. In fact, the religion of Hinduism, as it is, as a whole, it's called a dharma itself. And there's a specific kind of dharma, it's called Sanatan Dharma, which basically means dharma that is based in God's will.
Piyush, could I pause you just for a moment? It's a little hard to hear you, and I have my microphone turned all the way up. Is anybody else having a little trouble? Mary is. Okay.
Okay, just give me a second here, and maybe something happens with the mic, so I'll pause.
It sounds very echoey to me.
We really want to be able to hear what he has to say, don't we?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. How about now? Is it better?
It's about the same.
It's about the same. Interesting. So I'll actually put on my Bluetooth. So I'll just take a minute pause and I'll bring the Bluetooth.
Sure. That's just great. So I think what he was saying was that the root word dharma is, which sometimes is described as duty. It's also described sort of as law and as action. He was saying, I believe that is the word that is sometimes used for the Hindu religion as a whole. Is that what you heard, Carolyn?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then sva, that part of the word, I believe, means self. So like self-duty or something like that.
Self imposed or self-chosen.
Right.
Hey, how about now?
That seems a little better. Keep going.
Okay, great. I'm
Can you
talking
turn
from
it
my
up at all? Are you able to increase the volume?
This is actually just the regular setup that I have. I'm not sure if I can turn it on my side.
Okay,
Just,
better.
yeah, and just
Okay,
talking to the mic, that's, you know,
yeah, like speak closer. How about now?
We can hear.
We can, okay. Maybe we'll just try with this. And if there's
Yes.
any issues, then I can try maybe connecting to my phone, maybe something with my computer might be an issue.
It's better for echoes too. It's better.
Okay, great, great. Well, thank you.
Mhm.
So yeah, so essentially like today's talk is around the below part of the divine consciousness. And as we connect with this thing, uh, actually give me 1 second here. Hi. Okay. So my friend Marisa is also joining us for the talk. You can say hi if you want to. I'm not sure if you are. Oh,
Oh, aloha. Nice to have you join us.
okay. So last time we were talking about, from the Kashmiri Shaivism, the way in the Kashmiri Shaivism, there's this concept of the absolute, the divine that actually goes through successive contractions to come back, and live this life on as humans. And specifically, through that contraction, there are certain qualities that is imbued in this life of Shiva. And there's a concept of differentiation and a concept of separation. So what do I mean by that? So essentially, I think this is, especially as we are on this spiritual path, it's a very common way of sort of experiencing ourselves somewhere between this aspect of unity and duality. So we understand that concept, but there's actually a little bit more nuance to that. And that nuance actually becomes important when we talk about this concept of dharma. And specifically when we also talk about a very closely related concept of dharma, which is also called karam or karma. And we're going to go a little bit in both of them as well. So essentially the essence of differentiation is essentially that, the self is different from the universe. So it's that concept. So anytime when I experience myself, not necessarily separate, but as a different element, as a different entity than the universe itself. What that means is that perhaps I have this understanding or information or knowledge that I am somehow made of a different substance than the universe itself. The concept of separation is essentially around a concept that I'm actually, me and the universe are two separate entities. They are not just different, but they're separate. So they are separate in the sense that I'm not even a part of it. There is not even a quality that is different, but as an entire unit itself, it's just separate from the universe. Now, when we start getting into this understanding that we are different and separate, then we actually step into, there's this concept very closely related to dharma, which is called karam or karma. What karma means is that I am a doer of good and bad deeds. And that's essentially what the concept of karma is. We have, there's a lot of different traditions that have borrowed that word, and especially in the Western domain, we use concepts like bad karma. Like maybe this is the karma that has passed on through through bad deeds and so on. But that's actually just one part of it. So it's bad karma and good karma. Like there's all different kinds of karma that happens, and karma is just an artifact of us living human lives. And essentially, it's the awareness that I am the doer of good and bad deeds. And the root of that comes from the fact that when the I feels separate from the divine, then I becomes the doer of the good and bad deeds. In fact, I am the doer of any deeds relate to something being good, something being bad. And that's because I, as a unit, feel separate from the universe itself. I feel that, that I am acting as an independent single entity, while the universe is out there and there's like forces in the universe that is outside my control. So I'm essentially just always responding or reacting to these forces that are outside my control. And because of that, when I feel in harmony with the universe, I say that I'm doing good. And when I feel disharmony with the universe, I say that I'm feeling bad. And this is where that root of karma actually starts bringing in. So this is the essential concept to recognize, that the root of karma actually comes from the fact that I am a separate entity from the universe itself. In fact, when I say universe, I also mean divine, which is all encompassing, right? It's all encompassing of me as the self and me as the universe, or me as in the self that is divine. Now, the another root of karma, as I was saying, is that inability or the feeling that I am limited in my ability to act. So this is actually very essential, because this also connects with one of the concepts in Buddhist tradition. So dharma is a concept that is not just central to Hinduism, but is also very central to Buddhism as well. In fact, in Buddhism, there is much more articulation of the word of dharma and what does it mean to be on the path of dharma. And they have many different categorization of that as well. So in Buddhism, and specifically in the Vajrayana sect of Buddhism, we have, and also Mahayana as well, there's this concept of the 5 Buddha families, which are essentially like the 5 primal qualities of wisdom. And one of the quality of wisdom is one of the Buddha family, to which is also green Tara is also attached or associated with that particular Buddhist family of Buddha, is Amoga Siddhi. And the wisdom of Amoga Siddhi is the ability to be all accomplishing wisdom or all acting wisdom. It's the wisdom that the self, the divine self, is actually not limited in its ability to act. But what kind of action it actually talks about, right? It essentially talks about the action which is essential and which is truly meaningful. And the only actions that are truly meaningful and truly essential are the actions that is there, where there is not a concept of I am the doer, but the concept is that the divine is the doer and I'm the vehicle of that doing. I'm the vehicle of doing good, or I'm the vehicle of doing, and I'm not the vehicle of doing good or bad. It's the divine, it's the vehicle through which divine is acting through me. But we have to be very careful when we actually sort of like connect with that essence, because it is only true when it's completely honest. Like it has to have a feeling of honesty within ourselves, within our as we call like the 3 spheres of being, or the 3 bodies of being: a physical body, a mental body, and an emotional body. A lot of times it's easy to actually step into the space where you can justify acts, right? But that's also coming from a place of dishonesty, and it's not the divine. Anything that comes from a place of dishonesty is a simulation. It's kind of like a constructed reality that of the ego itself, as we were talking last time, that separates ourselves from this belief, from this consciousness that I am actually an image, a vehicle of the divine itself. So when we recognize that, right? One of the primal quality that actually comes in that recognition is that when I'm doing, when this is the vehicle of the divine to actually act through me, then there is naturally an awareness that is an awareness for all relations. That is the awareness of goodness, of well-being for all sentient beings. In fact, all beings, because all beings are sentient in one way or the other. And that's why it's kind of like an awareness that steps away from attachment to a particular vehicle, a particular like the mind, the emotional vehicle, the physical vehicle. It steps away from that and it recognizes that everything that exists, everything that is not separate from the divine. It's not separate from the absolute. And when we actually recognize that, we actually take a big leap in terms of moving away from the cycles of karma into what we call the cycle, the dharma itself, the art of living. We step into what is a true calling in that way, because then we are not actually playing mind games. We are not trying to construct a reality under which we are operating, but we are actually truly stepping into what is how the divine actually wants to use this vehicle. So as I was saying, the very first thing, the essential thing to recognize that, to recognize a dharma, to recognize, and as Renée was also actually talking about, the word dharma is essentially saying that what is the dharma of the self, right? What is the dharma of this individual? And this is where actually we come to the life of humans, the life of humanity. When we talk about like cosmic principles or the divine principles, I mean, those principles are eternal, right? Those principles they have always existed. They always exist everywhere. And they are all knowing and all accomplishing, right? But as we take birth into the human life, we have limitations, right? We are limited by the body to start with, as an individual entity who's acting here. Like, we're limited by the body. We're limited by our capacities of our emotional self, which I'm using it in with a little bit of caveat that capacity is actually an overused. At least I believe it's an overused word in this time and age. What we actually mean by capacity is not the capacity that a mind thinks, but essentially how much of our emotional self can be contained within, right? And we also have limitations in terms of how much can we know, right? In terms of our mental life, how much can we rationalize, how much can we process, how much information is available to us at any point in time. And so we're naturally born into this limitation, right? And because we are naturally born into this limitation, the aspiration towards that essence where we are one with the divine, where we are not separate from the divine, and we are truly just divine in action, is also limited. And that's why we say in the Kashmiri Shaivism tradition that Shiva goes through these successive contractions to experience the play of life, the Leela of life. So it's Shiva who actually chose to constrict himself in time, in space, in its ability, in its determination, in its knowledge to actually experience oneself as an individual human. So when we recognize that, so one thing to recognize is that, when we talk about karma, so it's not just an individual karma, but we are also sharing karma of the human family, and not just the human family, but the families or beings who are part of humanity, who are inherent into us living human life. And one of the tangible things to actually feel that is in the humanity, is in the human family itself. So there is always that, right? So, and this is where, actually towards the end of this particular talk, I'll talk about the difference between individual effort as well as grace. And this is where we'll actually come back to it, right? So there's inherently a karma that we are actually sharing, and that is something that we are sharing because we are part of this, part of this life of humanity. We are living one individual life. So when we recognize that, right? So then what is the role there? And this is where dharma, the concept of dharma actually comes in. So dharma, in the simplest of ways, what it stands for is the code, is the moral code where this notion of karma is minimized. It's the moral code through which we experience we can live in harmony with all that is there. And if you remember some part of the previous talk, we actually talked about harmony. We talked about how the divine will is essentially a harmonizing force for the forces that are inherent in matter, the forces that are naturally inherent in each individual expression of the matter itself. So essentially that, and how does that dharma and how is that harmony experienced? So there's an aspect of grace, and we were talking about last time, and we also touched upon very briefly this aspect of individual effort, and that individual effort through which we live a life, that is called dharma. So dharma is essentially any way of life that allows for us to live this life of harmony. And if you think of it as mythically, right? I mean, there's many traditions that actually talk about it in a very mythic way. In the Greek tradition, for instance, there's this concept of measuring the weight of the heart with a feather, right? So if the heart is lighter than the feather, then one actually experiences liberation. And if it's not, then one goes back into the circle of life. The same concept. It's the concept that how much of the harmony do we choose to live in? Do we actually make efforts to live in? And that determines the weight of the heart, right? So there's a lot of mythic traditions that actually speak to it. So in a way, it's not unique to the Indian subcontinent. It's a very common concept in many traditions in the world. But just so it happens, the word itself, dharma, has traveled far and wide, and it has meant it connected with a lot of people, right? One essence of actually recognize harmony. So, of course, we can understand what does harmony mean and feel like in the external world. The other essence of harmony in the internal world is also when there is, when no effort is filled with pride. And that is another aspect. Then, so, when we say, we were talking about karma just a few minutes ago, and I was saying the notion of karma is associated with the belief that I, as an individual, is the doer of deeds. And because I am separate from the universe, I am a doer of either good deeds or bad deeds, right? So the essence, when that I disappears, then the essence that I disappears in the sense that I disappears into this universe, when I can feel that sense of unity with the universe, then I can experience effort without any strife. I can experience effort as part of being as this unfolding that is happening in this divine life, so to speak. So coming back again, to the story of Shiva, right? So Shiva goes through these successive contractions, right? And to the point where it actually incarnates as a human. But essentially, it's that recognition that eventually it was Shiva all the time. It was always Shiva. You're not separate from the Shiva. So, when we experience, when we actually, do the deeds in the world, there's a recognition that it's actually Shiva who's going through who had went through successive contractions to be able to act and enact in this way of doing that is being done, right? Now, this is actually a very, there's a lot of nuance to this particular statement, as I was saying, right? So if we are on the spiritual path, right, or however we call the path, where we are self-reflective, where we, are reflective about the state of the world, and where we hold care for how our actions and our thoughts and our relationships impact the beings around us. And when we have that kind of awareness, right, naturally our impulse is to find harmony in all those spheres of our life, right? For some reason, if we don't have that sense, right, or if we have maybe through, things that are outside our control. Maybe we were never exposed to that kind of teachings or that kind of environment where we could experience that, right? So the recognition or the realization there is that Shiva also goes through even further contractions, even further than what we would call maybe the life of an average human being, to experience life in those ways as well, in those restricted ways as well. But it's essentially the same Shiva. So anytime when there is an awareness that it was Shiva after all that actually went through these successive contractions to experience life just the way it is, that is an experience. That is that moment where we actually connect, like where all the karma dissolves in that moment, and we connect with the true calling, with the dharma in a real way. So, and so now coming back to the two things that I was talking about, right? So how do we recognize what is a dharma, right? So as I was sharing that the key essence of recognizing a dharma is when we are in unity with divine, when not I, but the divine is the doer. And I as an individual self is just a vehicle, right? And there's two aspects to that, right? So one aspect is individual effort and one aspect is grace. Through individual effort, I can actually I can come to this recognition that I'm not the doer, right? The divine is the doer. So I can surrender, and it's the process of a successive surrendering into this sense that the divine is the doer, right? And that surrendering has, a lot of different traditions have different ways in which they teach how to actually get there, right? How to get to that space where a body becomes, like a lot of indigenous traditions says, a hollow bone. A body becomes a hollow bone so that the spirit can move through us, right? It's the same idea. In Hindu traditions, we call it the path of yoga, for instance. The path of yoga, so yoga stands for union, or path towards union. So the path of yoga is also that path of dharma, it's the path of purifying or clarifying a body so we can actually become that hollow bone, so that not I as an individual, but divine becomes the doer, right? And there are there's many different kinds of yoga. There are very prescribed ways of how one can conduct yoga. There's yoga which is most suited for ascetic lifestyle, and there's also yoga that is more suited for just day-to-day, what we call mundane lifestyle as well. So there's a lot of that, right? Many other traditions have prescriptions around that as well, like what is it to live a spiritual life. So any prescription, any sense that comes from that true essence of this path towards divine is in fact the path of dharma, right? And in this current world, we have the opportunity to actually define that for ourselves because we have access to so much wisdom, so much knowledge, so much information from so many different parts of the world. And not just that, we also have the opportunity to recognize and listen and hear exactly where we are, to the land that we live in, to the surroundings, to the environment, right? And that's where also those essences can come in. But eventually, there's that one time, like there's only so far as in this tradition of Kashmiri Saivism, we call, like there's only so far one can reach by personal effort. And personal effort is essentially, in a way, also, the path of yoga, in a way, is also preparing our bodies to be able to receive that divine grace. And grace is essentially that point where everything just annihilates, like the notion of I just completely dissolves. And many people have that experience in many different ways. And some people who with more awareness and more consciousness follow that path, they prepare their body so that those experiences become more frequent. While people who are not consciously choosing that path, they have those experiences as well, but maybe not as frequent, right? But essentially, we all recognize that point where this notion of self, the identity of self, just completely dissolves, and there's only just pure light of the divine. And that is the time where, as I was sharing earlier, like a karma dissolves and a true essence becomes very clear, right? And the true essence is always some signature of light. In fact, in one of the tradition actually that I follow, the concept of soul is nothing but it's it's a signature written in light. The soul is essentially a soul is the one that drives us, through this story of humanity, through this story of moving towards a spiritual path, and it brings us into life and it takes us into death, right? But that whole story of life and death is essentially a signature that is written in that light of the divine. So, and there's two things I want to close this with, and then would love to open up for hearing, how this lands for you and what is the wisdom that is within you as well. In Buddhism, for instance, they have this concept called Eightfold Path. And so when we call, when I talk about yoga or talk about other spiritual traditions, fundamentally, they just boil down to what I call this Eightfold Path, right? And what is Eightfold Path, right? Eightfold Path basically essentially comes down to that we have a healthy body. So essentially a path of yoga is a path towards that path of dharma is a path which cares for a body. It cares for how healthy a body is. So feeding it the right nutrition, right? Keeping it healthy and active and, and working with the body in that way. It is the path of right action. So every action that I'm doing is rooted in goodwill, at least at the minimum, goodwill for myself at the minimum, but also goodwill for my family, for all beings, and so on, right? So you can keep extending that sphere. It is based in right speech. So whatever I'm speaking is rooted in honesty, is rooted in truth. And at the minimum, again, it is at least serving myself in some way, right? At the minimum. But in true sense, it's serving all beings and all relations. It is also the path of right thoughts, which is sometimes very difficult to actually track. But as we, my experience is as we become more mindful about that, we can actually recognize and we can influence a thought to be the right thought. And again, the right thoughts are the thoughts that create harmony, right? It creates harmony in this vehicle, in this system that I'm given, but also harmony for every being and everything around me. It is also the path of right perception. So what I'm perceiving, how am I perceiving it? What am I looking at? What am I seeing, right? And if it's rooted in truth, then it is the right perception. And then for people who are on the spiritual path, it's also what we call right samadhi or right dissolution or right annihilation itself. There's many, many different ways to give oneself away, the small self, right? And there's a sense of like giving it away in the right way, to the right cause. And that cause is always in goodwill for all. So I'll pause here, and if we have time, I have a 3-minute meditation, or we can also move into discussion. Renée, maybe I'll ask you which direction would you prefer?
We should probably move into the conversation. And why don't we do this? Why don't we close at the top of the hour, and then those who can stay, maybe we could do that 3-minute meditation with.
Beautiful. Let's
Okay.
do that.
Let's do that. That sounds great. Okay. Well, that was such an exquisite presentation, Piyush. I just feel really uplifted as a human being, and whose soul is the signature of light, who can choose to follow or become a hollow bone through which the divine can pass through. It's just very uplifting. Thank you so much. Questions and comments from all of our other beautiful students here. Mary.
Thank you, Piyush. It was really interesting. I join these discussions and the gems from the wisdom tradition to, just enlighten myself and to realize that I've lived a very insular life and I don't know a lot. But I just, when you were talking about um, good and bad deeds, I heard seed. But it's very true that whatever good deed we do sows seeds of goodness or seeds of negativity. And so it's, I go, whoa. And, light bulb goes off. So, everything we do has the potential to harm or to help. And I just see so many correlations between all of the different wisdoms that are presented through the gems. So mahalo to Renee and mahalo to you, Piyush.
Mhm. Thank you, Mary.
I heard seeds also, initially, which reminded me of all the stories we hear about how we act depends on what seeds we choose to water.
Mm.
And it brought that to mind.
Mm.
And I find that pretty, what I want to give my attention to
Mm.
is a way of watering. Yeah. So thank you.
That is beautiful. So I think the seeds is the theme. What seeds are we watering? I love that.
And Margaret, could you follow up a little bit about how we might best determine which ones to water?
In my, it's the ones that make us feel good, as opposed to the ones that tie our stomachs in a knot or make us feel uneasy. If we can relax with what we're doing or what we choose or what we're thinking, as much as what we can choose for that, as to how we're feeding ourselves, whether it be through actual food or what we're choose to feed our brains with, what we're listening to, reading, seeing. I think for me, if I can feel relaxed and at ease with something, I know that's been a better interaction than if I feel tense or tight or defensive. So what I choose to feed would be, or to feed, to water, would be the things that make me feel at ease.
Mm. Mhm. Do you think that has something to do with this idea of divine will or true self or soul as a signature of light? Am I going too far?
No, I think actually it does. And it brings to mind what Piyush talked about, doing something without strife. I think it's the same kind of thing. If we can do something that takes a lot of energy, but is doing that energy bringing us, and I'll say on a going right to left or whatever, closer to God or further away, closer to the divine or further away. And I think when he talked about strife, and he could clarify that because I might not remember it exactly right, but when strife is involved, the strife that makes us little or fires us up to anger or something, I don't know, I get mixed up in there because there's anger that's justified and good. So it's not just black and white as to a kind of emotion, but I think I don't know, I'm kind of getting lost in what I was saying, but if something brings us closer to goodness as opposed to further away, then I think that's a good thing. And maybe divine will, that would be closer to divine will. But I don't know about all that. I'm just blabbing right now.
It sounds pretty wise to me. Bob?
Yeah, what was just mentioned reminded me of a parable in the Bible where a man plants seeds, and then during the night, an enemy comes and plants weeds. And so then they say, well, what do we do? And the farmer said, well, we really can't separate them at this time without destroying everything. If we try to destroy the seeds, we can't tell the difference between the wheat. And so we're going to have to let them grow a little bit, find the right time, and then pull them out. So we'll do them at that point, or even harvest everything, and it'll come out in the winnowing of the seed. In other words, the shards from the weeds will be too big to pass through for the wheat. And it just struck me that that kind of timeliness is a little bit there. And that may be when we can come to the point where, as the Buddha said, you will never do good through hatred or anger, and you won't only do good through love. And so you have to find the time when that becomes right. As Purush said, the Eightfold Path of right speech is not only knowing what to say, what is the truth, but when to say it, how to know about the other person. And of course, the other parable of the seed is, where do you throw the seeds? Do you throw it on fertile ground or on the sand or on the rocks? And that determines how the seeds will grow, how well they'll grow. And so it struck me that, the seed is not only ourself, but all that's around us that allows for things to grow. And the question I have with this is, and it's not my tradition, so I'm really struggling to understand it. We sometimes talk about the self or the soul as the beginning of a river that goes to the ocean. In other words, the waters are starting with a stream through a river and then eventually returning to the ocean. And I'm wondering, when you talk about Shakti or energy, does that have the quality of that going from soul to divine? And I'm thinking specifically, as you mentioned, light or sound, how we identify with the vibrational elements of sound or light. And I'm wondering if that relates to that quality of the difference between the individual soul and the divine soul, divine.
Yeah, what a good question, Bob. Thank you. And I love that that essence of the right timing, because that's again a part of our experience of human life or humanity, is to be bound with time, right? So in the tradition, Shakti is Shiva and Shakti are basically the non-dual forms of each other. So Shiva exists because Shakti exists, and Shakti is because Shiva is. And I'm just remembering a few years ago, actually, we did another gem talk, which was around Mahashivratri, and it was about the divine love and the divine union between Shiva and Shakti. In that sense, if we imagine, if we let ourselves actually see that this story is the story of consciousness in its absoluteness, right? Consciousness as a whole. When I say consciousness, I mean the essence that is beyond time, beyond space, beyond knowledge, beyond action, beyond any limitation, just is. So there's two aspects of consciousness. So one is awareness or divine awareness, the awareness that is aware of everything, every being, everything that exists and not exists all the time, and that's Shiva. So that's the absolute nature of Shiva. in this non-dual form. And Shakti is the pure vibration. So essentially, this is an experience again. Like this is hard to explain through words, but it's an experience when we become aware of something. What we are actually becoming aware of is just pure vibration, whatever vibration, whatever, like it doesn't matter what frequency it is, and that pure vibration is Shakti itself. So when Shiva and Shakti, both of them find limitation in space and in time, then the forms start happening, right? And there is in this tradition, there's a beautiful description of like the limitations as it cascades down. And somewhere up there is this essence of the river itself as well. So it's the river where the Shakti is the force, the driving force that makes this river flow, and the Shiva is the one who's aware of it. But here's the essence. Here's the interesting thing. So Shiva and Shakti exist beyond creation. So they are not just the one that is creating something. They exist beyond creation. They are something, and it's again something hard for us to imagine, but they exist in those spaces between creation as well, between life and death, between death and death. There's that space of silence, right? But anytime something is created, it takes a journey towards death as well. So everything that is created comes to life, and everything that comes to life moves towards death. And that's the if I could call it, the dharma of the river itself. The river starts at the source and it ends at the sea, right? And that's the journey it takes from life to death. And when we follow that journey, we can follow the journey of life to death. But this is an invitation to maybe experiment with when you're actually watching a river. So like if you allow yourself to just like watch the river, right, and just watch how maybe like a particular wave in the river starts and dies, right, and you keep watching it. There's a wave that comes up in the river, a swell that comes up in the river. It's created somewhere. It's born somewhere and it dies somewhere. And then eventually, if you let yourself like let that disappear on the periphery of your eyes, like you just let that disappear, and you focus on just what is here and now right in front of you, what you'll actually see is like this eternal space of life and death. Like something comes up, something dies, something comes up, something dies, and it just goes on and on and on, right? And in that moment, you recognize that everything that is actually born is born to take the journey towards death. Or in a way, everything that is born takes the journey towards complete merger with the divine eventually. So, and this is again the part of Shiva and Shakti, right? This is Shiva and Shakti that constricted itself into form, into some kind of limitation. And, and eventually like there's also that essence where that limitation goes away and there's just unity with something, eventually the divine.
In one form of Huayan Buddhism, they talk about the water and the wave. And so you have the wave, but it is completely water. And without the water, there would be no wave. But without some kind of movement and shape or activity, there would be no water. I mean, the water has to then take some shape and such. And I wonder if from what you're talking, that vibration of Shakti actually is life or consciousness.
Yeah. That's what it is. And eventually it's the recognition that every time it was Shiva and Shakti after all, right? In any limitation, it was Shiva and Shakti. It's always that water. It always exists.
And how does that pertain to our Swadharma?
So this is the Swadharma of the river that we were talking about. And as humans, we have this capacity and capability to actually see ourselves reflected into these other beings as well. And so, so that's when we go and sit and watch the river, we are actually not just seeing the river, but we are also seeing some reflection of ourselves in there as well. And And it's essentially, it's always the same concept, right? It's the concept that the divine actually restricted or constrained itself or took birth as a human, as a river, and then it goes back into the ocean, or into the absoluteness of silence. So there's so many words people try to describe it, but it's really just an experience.
That was a really helpful answer. Thank you so much. Carolyn?
In some quarters, it's popular to think, oh, let's all meditate together.
Mm.
And what do you think of that? Because it does seem that that could produce kind of a psychological mess. That, everybody's coming from wherever they're at that particular time. And the sought after unity and peace and a sense of a shared dharma doesn't get attained. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is it just better to think about and practice swadharma by yourself, or in your own room or something, or in your own forest? And how would you prevent some very dominant person kind of taking control of the group?
It's a very, very important, very key, something key that you're actually asking there. So Swadharma is never separate. It's never separate from the divine, right? Now, how is it practiced? And I'll actually share a story with you there as well. How is it practiced is of utmost importance, right? And the fundamental thing, actually coming to what Mary and Margaret was also saying earlier, what are the seeds that is being watered when we are actually stepping into that group meditation, right? To whose service, and if I was to present it differently, to whose service is that meditation? And how honest and how clear is the group, who's doing that meditation is. So there could be harmful effects as well. And in fact, one of my teachers, his name is John Luke, he was, organizing a workshop. I live here in Seattle, and he was organizing a workshop on the land very close by. And he was talking to these a couple of people, and these couple of people very with good intentions, and I'm specifically using that word, good intentions. They were talking about doing a ritual for the healing of the land. So it's a good intention, right? But like this is actually an indigenous land here, right? It's the indigenous land. It's the land of the people who have lived for thousands and thousands of years, right? There's stories that have unfolded, there's relationships that have unfolded and born and died and so on, right? So much more than what these very good intentioned people realize, right? So now, when they actually practiced, they actually went ahead and did it without seeking again, right information from the indigenous people who have lived in those lands and created that relationship with that land. They actually went ahead and did it, but they didn't recognize that in their limited sphere, again, we're talking about, the contractions, right? So in their limited sphere, the prayer that they actually offered to the land, in fact, ended up creating ripple effects that were violent towards the land. And the way it unfolded, and again, like people might call it coincidence, but my teacher, for instance, John Luke, like he has the gift of seeing the cause and effect of things. So he saw, like, the next day actually there was a mass shooting very close by in that particular land itself. And not to say that it was caused by that, but there are ways in which we offer a prayers, and if you're offering a prayers in peace, then it's also about what is the intention, what is the information, how are we actually offering it as well. So there is a sense of responsibility there too. So I don't believe that it's always good to like get together and meditate. Many times it is, and many times it's not. It's really determined by what what seeds are being watered there, just to take that. Is it based on the right, like the right mind, the right thought, the right emotion, the right information, the right, so there's a little bit more work to be done there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm thinking about the distinction that I think the Buddhists make between wisdom and compassion, and that we need both. It's not enough to have one without the other.
Yeah.
So these people had this good and compassionate intention, but without the wisdom to really know how to carry it out. And so perhaps that points to part of our Swadharma being to, if we want to truly be in alignment with the divine, to somehow make ourselves vehicles of that wisdom, being able to come through us. And many times it will probably be through trial and error, and we are going to make mistakes, and hopefully learn from those mistakes in order to increase our working wisdom, shall we say. I almost wonder if sometimes if we do have a very good intention, better to at least try it than to just let it go and not make any effort at all, because then we don't have the opportunity to learn. But we really do have to look at that intention very, very carefully, and how much personal self is there. Like, I know what is best in this situation. That seems to be quite fraught with danger, as opposed to just being open and just really asking, is this the appropriate thing at the appropriate time? Have I inquired of everyone that I know that might be able to lend some guidance in this situation, so that I have a broader picture of the whole before I move forward? And it seems like it's incumbent on us. You pointed to how much access we have to so much information, so many traditions, so many wise beings, really. And that can be a huge advantage to the whole, to the extent that we avail ourselves of them. Of course, we can't ever reach all, but to the extent that we do make that effort. I just love your hollow bone analogy. That I suppose that's from the Native American tradition, and maybe others as well. Do we empty ourselves out enough to be like that hollow bone through which, they're often used as flutes, right? That melody of the divine can sound through us. Well, we're at 4:01. For those of us who can stay on, I think it'd be lovely for us to do this 3-minute meditation to Piyush. I will just say as a thank you before people go that the depth of what you've been able to share with us from the Kashmiri Shaivite tradition was really enhanced by references that you gave us from the Greek tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Christian tradition, and that just help to make this a very universal topic that we could approach, and not feel that it is simply in the domain of one tradition or one way of thinking, one way of believing. It's really quite applicable to all. So we're all yours now, Piyush, those of us who are able to stay on.
Oh, thank you, Renee.
Have to go, but thank you so much. See you next week. Aloha.
Thank you, Mary. Before I jump into the meditation, I wanted to actually make one sort of close one loop, something that Margaret, actually, you were sharing about how anger, we were talking about the quality of anger, right? And again, in that way, anger is also a form of Shakti in this tradition. And in fact, if you look at many different images of Shakti, some are fierce, some are wildly fierce and wildly angered, right? in Buddhist traditions as well, there's a lot of images like that. The essence of that, the quality of that is I separate from that energy, from that vibration of Shakti, or is it the same? Is there a belief that I am the one who's angered at you because you're wrong, or is it that that there's no sense of I and I'm just dissolved in this sense of energy that has, anger has a particular direction and a particular pose to it. So am I anger itself, or am I someone who's angry at someone for something, kind of a thing? So it comes back to that essence of Bodharma as well, that some beings actually take birth in this life, maybe whose Bodharma is to actually bring that strong, energy in towards the world. So with that, if I can invite you all into a meditation, and it'll be a very quick meditation, something that you can take with you and even build on it. So just coming in contact with the breath as we settle down, just allowing ourselves to settle down, feeling how we are breathing, how we are sitting, and really there is no sense or no pressure to change anything, just being how we are. My invitation is to bring your awareness to the place in the body where you're sitting. This is the place that is allowing you to be held. As you take a few breaths there, breathing in and breathing out, breathing in again and breathing out. And breathing in and breathing out. And as you are settled here, invitation is just to notice what is going on in your mind. What are the thoughts? And specifically, the invitation is to notice, what are you doing in that thought? Maybe there is a thought of something that happened and you're reacting to it or you're responding to it. Maybe there is a thought that something happened and you're trying to wrestle with it or figure it out or, move with it. Just the invitation is to notice what you, as who you are, what you are doing in this thought or in this world that is created by your thought. Notice also all the beings that are in this world that you have created, that is going on in your mind. Maybe it's someone you know, maybe other people you know, maybe people at home, people at work, people in your community, or maybe it's just strangers. Maybe it's something that is happening on the other side of the world. But whatever it is, the invitation is just to notice, like, who are these beings and what you are doing there. And as you connect with this sense of, like, I am doing this, I am saying this, I want to say this, or I feel this, or I want to feel this. Any of those qualities, my invitation is now just to let that I, that whoever that I is, to let that disappear and let yourself see what is happening almost from a space above, almost as a world that is happening. And this I, as who you are, is just another being in this world. just another being in this world, like any other being. And this person who you thought it was you is just another being in the world acting out this life. And if you can come to that place, you will recognize who you are right now is just awareness, or one quality of awareness. Who you thought you were is just another vehicle acting out in this world. And this is the space where we move away from I am doing this to this is just happening. And now bringing this awareness and holding this quality that one can always let this I dissolve and become aware of just the happening in this world. And this is the divine play that is happening. This is the play of life. And as you observe this world, my invitation is to come back again to your breath and let it continue happen. So, breathing in, you're breathing out. You're breathing in, you're breathing out. And whenever you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. And you can take this meditation as far as you like. And eventually, with the right timing, the right space, one can also experience that moment of grace where all of the world just dissolves and it becomes just a play of divine in a way. And I hope you do experience that. Thank you.